Hello, good evening and welcome to the program. This is Sunday Politics live on Trust TV. Thank you most kindly for joining us on this week's edition of the program. This is where you come to for the topical conversations focusing on developments within the polity, focusing on Nigeria and other developing issues on the international scene. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you most kindly for making the time. Now, Nigeria's ongoing saga with regards to the minimum wage negotiations has hit yet another brick wall. After so many offers and counter offers, it does appear that we're nowhere near a consensus as far as the figure is concerned, where the government and the organized labor, by the form of the tripartite committee, have reached a conclusion. However, new numbers have emerged following the Nigeria Governors Forum's position, saying that they cannot afford even the rejected 60,000 naira proposal from the federal government, opting to stick with something way below what the organized labor has already rejected. The response from the organized labor, well, resign if you can't pay salaries, is as clear as the message is from the representatives of Nigerian workers. But this signposts an even deeper issue around how it does appear that there is a great misalignment between what the government is trying to do and what Nigerians expect it to do as far as its responsibilities and obligations are concerned. So, what comes next, especially in light of the threat by organized labor to just suspend its previous nationwide strike action, which grounded to a halt the Nigerian economy, sending further shockwaves to an already embattled economy that is struggling to regain its momentum, especially over the past few years. What can we expect by way of compromise, especially given how Labour has also, on its part, decided to come down significantly from its earlier proposal of 494,000 as far as its minimum wage position is concerned. And what does this new frontier of back and forth represent, especially as Nigerians continue to languish in this current economic climate? Well, these and many more we hope to navigate the discussions as well as try to make sense of some of these developments. But before we get started, let's once again refresh your memories with regards to the position of the Nigeria Governors Forum and why they think 60,000 naira is untenable. Let's hear from the representative of the governors. Here's Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State.
Had a very fruitful deliberation, and of course, you know, it's a technical subcommittee of a committee, and at the level of our committee, we almost we have reached near consensus, and it is our hope that by the time we get to the plenary, we'll have a complete agreement, and maybe from there, the media can start their job. But as it is now, I think we are better off than we were before the technical committee.
So the meeting is not ended yet?
The technical committee is over.
Okay.
And of course, you know, it's a tripartite committee. We struggle to reach an agreement, at least between the government and the organized private sector. We are still engaging the organized labor, and I'm almost confident that in a few minutes from now, after the plenary, we would have reached a concrete agreement.
But it does appear the governors are in agreement about what they can afford and what they cannot afford. And Labour is also very emphatic about what it can accept and what it cannot accept. So far, every offer that has been brought to the table is not acceptable to the organized labor. They say there is room for a lot more to be given to Nigerian workers, especially considering the current economic climate. Well, there's a whole lot to unpack. Let's get the conversation started. Joining me on the program tonight is the one and only Ahmed Sajo, a public affairs commentator, who is helping us, going to help us analyze and navigate some of these issues. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Good evening.
You know, this is one particular issue that continues to reverberate around numbers, offers and counter offers. It doesn't appear like we're anywhere close to a consensus. 1 minute there's going to be a fresh proposal to the table, and then the next minute it gets rejected, and we're back at it all over again. How would you like to sum up what has been a rather controversial negotiation for a new national minimum wage?
Well, thank you very much. I think the controversy is unnecessary, and I say it with all sense of responsibility. You see, it's a tripartite committee, and by tripartite committee, it means that there is government on one hand, the private sector on the other hand, and the labor movement on the third hand. What I find very difficult to understand is why the state and the federal government cannot consolidate their positions. Because they are government, and because, like I said elsewhere, and I'm saying it again, that the payment of emolument of political office holders across the states is the same. So if the states think that they don't want a uniform payment dictated from the center for whatever reason, then it should start with the payment of political office holders. That let states pay political office holders according to their capacity, if it is according to capacity. But if they receive salary, the emoluments of political office holders in Zamfara is the same as in Rivers and the rest, then the ordinary worker should also receive the same pay across board, federal or state. This is my own position on the matter. Secondly, where we are expecting resistance should have been with the private sector, because manufacturing, would be adversely affected. The cost of production is usually, even from elementary economics, is land, labor, and capital. And the cost of capital has already gone up because the interest rate has gone up. Now the cost of labor is also going to go up. The manufacturing sector will have to shoulder it. And if they shoulder it, eventually they have to push it down to the consumer. And there is a limit to how much the consumer himself will continue to accept, rises in prices within the market. And don't forget that anytime there is an increase in salaries, market people increase the prices as if everybody within the economy benefits from the increase.
You're saying there's an upside and a downside to what is currently ongoing.
What is going on?
Which has become somewhat of a tradition, isn't it?
But I am, squarely, advising both sides. For example, I think government, when I say government, I mean government, both federal and state, have actually delayed this issue of minimum wage. This minimum wage template is not only long overdue because of the nature of the legal requirement of a review after.
It elapsed on April 18 this year.
Exactly.
So it's close to 2 months now.
It's close to 2 months now. But beyond that, we must also realize that, a minimum wage is necessary for us to cushion the effects of all the hiccups within the economy, like the removal of oil subsidy, the dollar issue. All of these things have affected the purchasing power of ordinary Nigerians, and including workers. So the minimum wage is long overdue. But I am saying that labor also should begin to think about innovative ways of asking for support, from government in respect of what they earn. Why can't we start talking about food vouchers? Why can't we start talking about transport vouchers? Why can't we start thinking about health benefit vouchers? Government can also support workers without necessarily adding salaries all the times, as if salary is the only thing that the worker. Why can't we improve our transport system and provide transport vouchers? So these are some of the things. If you go to our neighbors, go to Cameroon here, if you are a worker, you are a registered worker, you have your ID card. That ID card has a QR code. With that QR code, you have benefits at certain locations where government has control, including cost of drugs in pharmacies. You understand? So,
but those are the same subsidies that we're trying to get rid of, isn't it? That the government says it cannot afford. I mean, that's exactly what you're prescribing.
No. The subsidy you're talking about is a blanket subsidy. Just like, this increase you are talking of now, if you increase worker salaries, how does it affect, how does it increase your own pay if you are not a worker? We're talking about government taking care of its own workers.
There's the ripple effect, the stimulus it creates or generates within the economy.
It doesn't.
It increases purchasing power.
It doesn't. It does
increase. I mean, if you're earning 100,000 naira now and then you start earning 200,000, surely numerically your purchasing power has increased.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is that instead of talking about increasing salaries, just the pay, announce a pay rise, which will stimulate a rise in inflationary trends. Why can't we, peg a certain the wage, but find incentive for workers and for ordinary people?
Yeah.
It's not a subsidy thing.
Yeah.
Look,
but also,
all the money we are spending on palliative, quote and unquote, could go into improving the lives of ordinary people in a way that is not what we are seeing today.
But in staying with the negotiations, you did talk about two sides, and quite frankly, it does appear that there are four sides. You have the federal government on one side, organized private sector on the other side, organized labor, and then the state governors who have now come
officially
who have now entered. No, I understand.
Officially it's a tripartite agreement.
But also the governors have come out to say, listen, what is even on the table that was rejected, the 60,000 naira itself, is not sustainable. They are speaking for themselves.
What I'm saying
they cannot afford to pay.
What I am saying is that
let's talk about the misalignment, because
consider the effect of governments disagreeing with each other on the trust deficit that exists between government and the public. We shouldn't allow it. Government should speak with one voice. If there is any need for government
who should take the lead here?
Federal government should take the lead,
right,
so that they can align with the state government. Since it's a tripartite discussion, government, federal and state should speak with one voice, private sector one voice, labor one voice. You can imagine if they go into that negotiation and then NLC says this is our figure, TUC says this is our figure. Would that not add to the confusion? Or we go into organized private sector, then manufacturer said this is our figure, service provider said this is our own figure. You think that would work? So if it's a tripartite discussion agreement that is being fashioned out, the three groups must align themselves and speak with one voice. Government, state, federal, state, and local government. Private sector, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is service sector, whether it is whatever, one private sector. Labor, whether it is TUC, JAC, or NLC, they speak with one voice. That will bring harmony into the system, that will create synergy, that will align, and that will bring about agreements faster. But when government breaks into two, first and foremost, it introduces confusion into the negotiations. And then secondly, it erodes trust deficit. People will begin to see government as itself not organized. And when you no longer trust government, it's a difficult situation.
I think that trust deficit, most Nigerians watching right now would say, has been there for quite some time, and rightfully so. But on the issue of what is going on right now, we do know that the economy is not particularly in a good state, and there's been a lot of talk about reality, pragmatism, and the ideal situation, that what labor is asking for is the ideal situation, but we're not in an ideal situation right now where Nigerian workers could get a living wage, for instance, because it means government will bend over backwards to just pay salaries, and there's a lot more to do than just pay salaries. Where do you stand with regards to the practicality of attempting to pay what Labour thinks is a fair wage? As of the last time of asking, they were down to 250,000 naira.
I think, in fairness to the Nigerian worker deserves much more than he's being paid. But the reality is that no government, no private sector, no state government can pay what Labour is asking for. Not because Labour workers do not deserve the pay, but because the economy cannot sustain such a pay. That is damn, open. That's the situation. That amount, if you make it the minimum wage, don't forget there is consequential adjustment. By the time you go for consequential adjustment, no organization in Nigeria presently would be able to pay that amount. That's the reality. But again, when it comes to payment of a minimum wage that is sustainable, we have to consider also that the workers needs to have something that, even if it does not take them home, but it should be something reasonable. My concern in this situation now is that we seem to over-centralize a lot of things that we should not over-centralize. I am still asking why we have to have a minimum wage in the exclusive legislative list. The capacities to pay, even among the states, is not the same. The oil-producing states get far higher than some other states. Apart from that, the states that are in urban centers have much higher revenue, internally generated revenue.
But to be honest, this is not necessarily uncommon the world over.
I understand.
It's standard practice, isn't it, to have a bare minimum, to say, listen, across the nation, no one is going to get less than X amount of money for the services that he's providing.
Which federal system has that?
There are many nations that have...
Which federal system has that?
But the point is not the system. The point is the idea behind minimum wage.
I'm talking about the idea behind the minimum wage is a wage that is between an employer and the employee. And if we are beginning to have hiccups between, look, the 18,000 that was there before, not every state was paying as at the time it was 18,000. No, when it became 30, not every state was paying. It should begin to tell us that, look, and then the monitoring mechanism that is in the law has never been applied.
But why do you think they were not paying? Because they can't afford it, or because the willingness to pay isn't there?
Some cannot, but some
you believe that there are some states who cannot afford to pay 30,000?
As at the time, yes.
Because the money was just not there?
Was just not there.
Or priorities were misplaced?
Some states had no money at some point. But presently, and I say it, and I'm saying it again, when subsidy was being paid for petroleum, it was essentially the federal government that was paying that subsidy from the Consolidated Revenue Fund. But when subsidy was freed, the money was shared to
the states.
The states. So if they are benefiting from increased revenue accruable to the federation account as a result of the removal of the subsidy, then responsibilities that come with that should also be shared.
So what are your thoughts about the governor saying, listen, we can't afford to pay? And Labour's response is quite clear. If you can't pay, resign. We know that, there's no chance that any governor is going to resign because he cannot pay salaries. No, but what do you think about their emphatic no to saying that even the 60,000 naira that has not even been agreed to?
My take in all of these things is that minimum wage negotiation is something that should be done swiftly, carefully, with a whole lot of patriotism. If we allow it to plunge the country into crisis, which it is capable of, then we are not being fair to ourselves. You could notice
when you say we, who are you talking about exactly?
We, the people of Nigeria, and the government in particular. The governments and those that are responsible, including Labour, that we must all be responsible enough to avoid using this minimum wage negotiation to plunge the country into crisis, because it's a possibility. When one side takes a hard line, the other side takes a hard line, the tendency is there'll be crisis, and we're not hoping for crisis.
If you can situate it in terms of percentages, right, between who should take a larger share of the responsibility for making sure that this impasse is broken and there is something tangible, that at the end of the day, nobody's going to feel shortchanged, nobody's going to feel like, the other person got the upper hand, because at the end of the day, we want this country to progress. Who would you put the sole responsibility of seeing this through to make sure that, we make progress from this back and forth? That's
a hard one. A hard one in the sense that quite definitely the responsibility, the greater responsibility for order in our society lies with the government. There is no argument about that. But Labour also has a huge quantum of responsibility to make sure that their actions or inactions do not plunge the country into crisis.
If you're in Labour's position, what would you be doing differently? Because the Black House, for instance, from last week, the Attorney General of the Federation was quite stern about it. The SGF was just talking, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation was talking about how it was evil, how it was, sabotaging and all of that, because they didn't appreciate the fact that for 48 hours or so, there was no power supply across the nation. If you were in Labour's shoes, if you were in the leadership, what would you be doing differently to get, one, the maximum, deal for Nigerian workers, but two, to also be mindful of the fact that if your actions go haywire, it could backfire on the Nigerian economy and further destabilizing an already fragile system. What would you be doing different? What do you think?
I think we should have some national assets that constitute essential services for the ordinary people of this country. Those assets must be protected. For example, no matter what crisis you are in, you need information. So even during the times of the most extreme of crisis, for example, journalists and media workers are allowed to work. You need security and protection. Policemen and others are allowed to work. To a large extent, hospitals are also allowed to function, no matter what the situation is. And I think power should belong to those highly essential services that benefit the people. You can imagine if you turn off the grid while a patient is on the operating table, it's literally that person has been killed. And let me put it this way, that everybody is talking about what the workers should earn, what government should pay, what private sector should pay. And the reason why our economy is where it is today, why we are crying that we cannot pay A, B, C, and D, is because our productivity level is very low. And our response to crises that affect our economy is very, very poor. I give you an example. This year, for the better part of the dry season, when tomatoes and vegetables are produced through dry season farming, for most of it, there was an attack by a disease and a pest. We had not responded adequately. Today, a small dustbin basket of tomato is between 15 to 20,000 naira. Assuming, we pay attention to productivity, assuming we force every of our governments in the states, to put a certain percentage of the land available, into agriculture, assuming we can produce sufficient food stuff for ourselves, we will not have the prices that we have today, to the extent of saying, okay, to have a living wage, this is it. Assuming, for example, we engage the private sector in establishing a workable transport system that is decent and can take people at a cost that is manageable, we will not start talking about a higher wage. Assuming workers themselves had, insisted ab initio that our refineries must function and that we must refine our own petroleum and sell it at a cheaper rate. We have now seen the lie in it. How long did it take Dangote to start a refinery from beginning to the end? And then we have 4 refineries and we could not even maintain them. Assuming, I'm just looking at all of these things. So the whole thing is that a living wage is a wage that should be able to sustain you. In that living wage, you should be able to buy food for your family. In that living wage, you should be able to transport yourself to work and come back. In that living wage. So the bottom line about wage is about the wage, the take home, taking you home.
Right. So let's talk about the political leadership and how a lot of Nigerians say they are, one, dishonest and lack sincerity and the will that is needed to be honest about the conversation we're having today. And you started on that particular note about how political appointees are overpaid, to say the least.
No, I'm not saying overpaid. I did not say overpaid.
I mean,
said is that
you might not have used that word,
they are
but
paid.
You insinuated it.
No, okay. I am saying they are paid the same, whichever state they come from.
Yeah, right. And I think there's a consensus there that most of them are overpaid because they're glorified assistants who don't actually have a portfolio.
I did not use the word overpaid.
Okay. I'm just saying that there is some sort of there's a sense you get a sense that the public feel like these are part-timers who are paid more than career civil servants for a short period of time, and more often than not, half of them don't do much, in those particular positions. I'm not talking about, the likes of the commissioners and things like that, but I'm talking about your senior special assistants and special advisors. I suppose you don't subscribe to it, but the point is this. The point is this. There's a lack of sincerity about the issues because you look at the wages, the allowances of the political elites. There is no doubt that they're some of the best paid in Africa, right? And for the most part, people are saying, listen, we don't see you cutting down on your cost of governance, on the cost out of the public purse that it costs to take care of your homes, it takes care, of the running cost of your office and so on and so forth. But you're making a case for workers to understand that, these things are not sustainable. Do you think that lack of sincerity itself is one of the reasons why Labour is unwilling to budge on saying, listen, we're going to do our very best, make sure we get the last penny that we can from these negotiations, because we know it is going to take us another 5 years until the next negotiations come around?
My brother, look, let me tell you, if you're talking about insincerity in this country, if you really want to talk about insincerity in the manner we operate, I think there is a greater blame at the doorstep of the workers than even the political office holders.
What do you mean?
Exactly. I was in a state cabinet. Till I finished my tenure, I didn't know the color of the checkbook of my ministry. Everything that you accuse political office holders of doing in this country, in terms of the corrupt practices that we always hear, if you check, they cannot do it without the acquiescence and the contributions of the civil servants.
Is that a justification?
No, it's not. I'm just saying, let us be honest. All of us.
Yeah, but that's not the issue at hand.
It is.
That's not what we're discussing.
It is.
If the president and the governor say today, we want to offer 100,000 minimum wage, tell me how a civil servant is going to stand in the way of that happening.
If we block leakages, if civil servants block leakages, if civil servants do not support the corrupt practices of people in power, they will be able to save the state funds that will meet whatever is required.
From your recollection, how many civil servants were jailed for fraud and graft compared to the number of politicians that we see year in, year out being how many, prosecuted by EFCC?
And how many politicians do you see their signature on the documents that bring out the money?
We can talk about the ones that have been jailed.
But how many of them have their signatures on the documents that bring out the money?
That's not the point. That's not the point.
That's
the person who calls the shot gets to bear the responsibility.
No.
The buck stops
you
at the desk of the president.
That is our.
At the desk of the governor. And whoever is in position to call the shots.
That is our hypocrisy. Everybody in the chain.
But what has that got to do with minimum wage?
Because everybody is now, if you want to prove that political office holders who are saying they cannot pay minimum wage are not telling the truth because there is enough resources to pay minimum wage. You must prove how the resources are used wrongly that is making it difficult. What Labour is saying is that if government can cut costs, if government can control corruption, there will be enough money to pay whatever minimum wage they want. But that corruption and cutting of costs cannot happen by only political office leaders.
So let's do it this way. Close to ₦1 trillion was spent this year within the space of 3 months, the first quarter of this year, by just 30 governors on sitting allowances, refreshments, and so on, and travels. That is how much money is available within the system to cater to this secondary, if not tertiary, needs that we have to cater for our political leaders. And that is the case that a lot of people are making. That it's not as if these resources are not there, but the way they are being allocated, the way they are being appropriated, seems to signpost that, listen, let's take care of the top of the pyramid and forget about everybody at the bottom. And that's why this frustration is permeating the polity.
I am telling you that the level of misuse of resources that you're talking about does not stop at political office holders.
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is that you can make both arguments. And still
let me ask you.
the same conclusion.
Let me ask you one question. Have you heard of mismanagement of pension funds?
In what sense exactly?
Pension funds. Have there been theft of pension funds in this country?
I think there have been several issues with regards to people accessing their pensions and so on and so forth.
And pension managers misappropriating pension funds. There was never a political office leader at the head of a pension fund. They are mostly civil servants.
I feel like we're having different conversations.
We're having the same conversation.
We're talking about available resources. These are some of the funds that the federal government, by the way, is again thinking about accessing to finance
That's a different
it's the same pension funds. That's exactly the pool of money that the federal government is trying to target.
The contributory pension is different from the pension that we inherited. The ones that have been misappropriated. All over the country, pensioners have not received their gratuity and the rest. That much money is the one I'm talking about.
Right, okay.
The contributory pension, let me tell you, if you are ever on contributory pension, every month they send you a text message telling you how much you have and what the money is.
I am on contributory pension, and of course the federal government is targeting.
You have not been receiving your district?
I don't think there's an issue with my pension administrator, but the point still remains that I think we're digressing a little bit.
But let us look at it this way.
Let's get back on track. Just want to notify our viewers that we're opening the conversation for you. If you want to join, if you want to chime in, perhaps counter some of the points being made, or perhaps even support it if you agree with some of the points being made by our guests this evening. Feel free to join the conversation. The numbers will be shown on your TV screen in just a moment. We're talking about the ongoing minimum wage saga, how this impasse continues to, at best, capture the imagination of Nigerians who are still perplexed as to why there is no consensus about what is a fair wage for Nigerian workers going forward, especially considering the over 33% inflation that we're dealing with, alongside the other economic indicators that seems to suggest that, you know, a lot more tougher times lie ahead. Join the conversation if you can. We'd love to hear your take on this one. Let's speak to our first caller then. Hello, good evening and welcome to the program. Your name and where you're calling from.
Yeah, good evening, Abdullahi Ahmed.
Good evening.
I'm the in the studio.
Good evening.
Yeah. My name is Ali Umar Shamaki from
Ali Umar Shamaki, it's been a while. Thank you so much for calling in. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Actually, in fact, Tinubu is not fair to workers.
Tinubu is not what? Tinubu is not what?
He is not fair at all. He's not fair.
Right, okay.
He's not what?
He's not fair at all. In fact, I see no reason why he's just dragging this thing. We thought by bringing out the template, by now, all these issues have been stopped already. Why are they going up, coming down? And especially in today, the way former president did, Goodluck Jonathan, he announced once, he don't.
But Shamaki, what do you think about the governors who want to pay 57,000 naira as minimum wage as against what was last offered? I mean, the federal government even went as far as go to 62,000, but the governors now are taking us back, apparently, with this position of theirs.
In fact, it's shameful to some of them. I am expecting them to inculcate what the state governor did. He announced, he did it immediately that day. So there is money. The subvention will increase before them. In fact, as a secretary and a civil servant and a teacher in my local government, how much is a measure of rice and a maize now? A measure of maize is overnight. A measure is overnight. Other things. So teacher is connect.
Yeah.
So what are suffering?
Yeah. Shamaki, just a moment. I think the connection has gone bad, and we're gonna have to let you go. But I think we got the gist of, you know, your position, which is, of course, re-echoing the frustration of Nigerian civil servants who feature change. He said it is not fair that, you know, the government is still dragging this particular issue, knowing what Nigerian workers or Nigerians generally are going through because of our current economic condition.
Yeah, I think it's a very disturbing situation. But again, let's look at it this way: what the state governments are saying, and I'll put it on table. What they are saying is that, look, their responsibilities is not just to workers. That there are other citizens in the states who have responsibilities, you know, who are obligated to them, right. And that if they take their entire allocation and spend it on salaries, what happens to other governors? I don't
know about entire allocations, but let's go back to the phone lines. Hello, good evening.
That's what they are saying.
Right. Hello, good evening and welcome. Hello, good evening. Don't know if we still have our caller on the line. Okay, we've lost that connection. Feel free to call back again. The number is shown on your TV screen. Rules of engagement: please turn down the volume of your TV set while calling in and go straight to the point. Articulate your thoughts. Let's speak to our next caller then. Hello, good evening and welcome.
Hello.
Good evening. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
Your name and where you're calling from.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
This is Mohammed Bello.
Mohammed Bello, where are you calling from?
From Mina.
Mohammed Bello from Mina. How is Mina this evening?
Well, fine, thank you.
Right, go ahead, Mohammed.
Well, thank God. Well, in fact, your analysts have said it all, that federal government, state government, and local government is one arm. Also, the issue of PUC, the other NLC, all are one arm. Therefore, it is now left to the government to join hands as well as accept what NLC said or come to a consensus by making it in form of this is what the government can afford and this is what NLC is demanding for.
Right.
Therefore, they will arrive at a simple solution.
Right. Mohammed, you see the federal government increase its offer to 62,000. You see Labour come down to 250,000. Do you feel optimistic that they are close to a consensus?
Well, the only solution to all this problem is the issue of making the subsidy issue of petroleum. If government can do something to bring down the price of petrol to a reasonable and acceptable price, all these issues of salary increase and what have you will have not be an issue.
Right.
The government is not being sincere, knowing fully that every single development and achievement in this country lies on petrol, the availability of fuel. If today the government is sincere, let it bring down the price of petrol to a reasonable price, say 250 or 300, and then see whatever is given to labor, definitely it is going to be accepted and it will be the solution to this problem.
Right. Okay, Mohammed, thank you so much for calling in, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. He talked about how subsidy could be the panacea, but as we understand, the subsidy regime is still in some regards.
Nothing is. The truth is that, let us face reality. Nothing is going to bring back subsidy. The only thing that can,
as far as the public is concerned,
can reduce.
We understand that the subsidy is still in effect.
No, the government has said no. And let us.
Yeah, but it's not about what the government says.
No,
it's about the reality on ground.
It's what the government says.
Yeah, but
you are not the one paying.
No,
but
the marketers okay. So the marketers are telling us that the true price, the landing cost, is above what we're paying right now. So who is offsetting the rest of the money?
Well,
it costs more than 700, 800 naira to land a liter of petrol.
All I am saying is that everything we're talking about a living wage. We're talking about increasing the living wage. We're talking about reducing the cost of living. But all of these things are controlled by one factor: productivity.
Okay.
Are we ready to also address the issues of productivity?
Right.
Are we ready to increase our productive capacity?
Right.
Are we ready to drive our economy, not to be a consumption economy, but a productive economy?
Okay.
If we don't do that, we'll just be wasting our time.
Okay. A lot of people will say, let's start with the minimum wage first, and then we can address all of Let's go back to the phone lines. Hello, good evening.
Abdullahi Ahmed Shamaki is back again.
Okay, Shamaki, you're back. You have more to say?
Yeah, I have something to say again.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm advising the labor they should also consider that amount they are giving to federal government to be sincere is too much.
What if it's a negotiation tactic, Shamaki? They started from 600, now they're down to 250. I think they're getting closer to their main target. Yeah,
that's why I say they should also consider. So that 200,000 they should also consider.
Right. So
they should bring out tangible amount that everybody can see it as a reasonable amount. Are you getting it? So to me, even especially federal government, they will start at 100,000. It's a reasonable amount. So at least at the end of the month, every worker should know what is taking home.
So Shamaki,
that is
if we don't get to a consensus as soon as possible, who are you going to hold responsible for that?
Should be federal government.
The federal government.
Because Mr. President is the number one of everything. He's number one. So if he can be able to give much order to governors, I believe they'll give everything else. Just like what the former president did, Goodluck Jonathan, during his time, he get much order to the governors, and they took some key. My governor is the first person that paid 18,000 as a them. So the president should do something.
Right.
He should give much order to governors. We don't want to hear another strike again because the Nigerians are losing. Look at just today, billions of naira just go for nothing like that.
Right.
This is my contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shamaki. I appreciate you for calling back to finish your line of thought there. It's looking very likely that before we get to a conclusion, another strike is imminent. I mean, especially given Labour's position, and you get the sense that the governor's new position on the situation of things is only going to compound things.
No, I believe government will harmonize.
Right.
I believe government will harmonize.
Okay. Back to the phone lines. Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening. Okay.
You understand?
Just try again. Try calling.
So
back
what
again.
I'm saying is that
I think the caller is still there. Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the program. If you can speak up a little bit so we can have a conversation. Your name and where you're calling from, please.
My name is James. I'm calling from Abuja.
James from Abuja. Good to hear from you, James. Go ahead, please.
Yes. I want to look at it from a different perspective.
Go ahead.
Can the NLC just focus their attention on asking the government to bring down inflation? Because if they bring down inflation, it will affect the general public. Because if government decides to give them what they're asking for, in the next 2 years, the inflation will go up, and we are back to where we started. Can we take a different approach towards this?
Right. That's what you think is more important than asking for more money.
That's what I think is more important. Moreover, how many persons are under the government payroll? Majority of the citizens are in informal sector. So we can get inflation to come down, even with the current wage, it will affect the generality of Nigerians. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, James. I appreciate you for calling and for keeping it short and simple. I must also say that some of the demands that organized labor is putting on the table also has to do with things like electricity tariff hike, for instance, which they want a reversal on after it was, increased significantly, with many Nigerians feeling disenchanted about it. But if you look at where we are right now with regards to the negotiations, what comes next, 62,000 is on the table from the federal government, 57,000 according to the governors, who, by the way, we all know they're going to default on some of these payments. A good number of these state governments still do not pay 30,000. So I don't know how they're able to even arrive at 57.
I think what matters is the consequential adjustment. You are talking about, when you talk about the minimum wage, you're talking about the benchmark, the lowest, the least worker will get. Level 1, step 1. Now, what are the consequential adjustments, even within level 1? Level 1 to step 17 or thereabout. Then level 2, step 1 to whatever, level 3. And then the same thing in the organized private sector, to which I am sure you are going to be a beneficiary, because your station here employs as much as much more than 50 people, so you will be covered by the law. So let's look at it this way. It's the consequential adjustment that everybody is concerned about. If the least person collects 250,000, for example, what would be the director on level 17? What is he going to receive? And so if you put that table, down, you look at it, is it sustainable? That's where we're having a problem.
But you consider inflation, and you realize that while the number is growing, the value. I mean, it's all about inflation, isn't it? I
know. What I'm saying is that it doesn't mean that if you pay that amount, it will still take the worker home. It will still be shortfall. The best way
at least they can afford
this
at
issue,
least they can afford the expensive stuff. They can't even afford it.
They may not, my brother. They may not. Let's be honest. They may not. Immediately the minimum wage is announced, rents will go up. Prices of
rents are already going up, by the way.
Exactly.
Everything is going up.
It's going
even
up.
Without. So I think it's only fair that minimum wage catches up to everything else that is going up.
Minimum wage will never catch up. The only thing that can make minimum wage catch up with cost of living is increased productivity within the economy, availability of goods and services, and that is where we have all got it wrong.
Just before we go, if you have to advise, because we're not talking much about the private sector because they're not as loud as the state government or the federal government or labor.
But they are
very important to the conversation. If you're to advise the government about the next steps to take, and organized labor the next step to take, so that we can avoid the worst case scenario, which is another industrial action. What would it be?
I think the ding dong is enough. Each side should come to a realistic amount that they can afford. And if that becomes the realistic...
What is realistic in your mind right now? What one figure that if they announce it, you would not be surprised? You would say, yeah, this makes sense.
If I were to advise, I am not in a position to pay. I do not know the pulse of the employers across board. I would have thought that all this ding-dong was heading to 100,000. But I know that...
So if you hear 100,000 now breaking news, you'll be okay with it?
No. I know that, it will not be fair to the private sector.
Right.
I'm being very honest, yes.
Right. Okay.
It's the private sector I'm worried about.
Okay.
Because they are already paying more for electricity, they're paying more for diesel where they're using generator, they're paying more for black oil, and then now they have the prices of their goods are so high that people are not even buying. If they increase the cost of, they are paying more for capital because the interest rates have gone up. If you add labor, they will not be able to produce goods that can be put on the shelf for you to be able to buy.
Okay.
I think your minimum wage.
Yeah, I think when he says they cannot, sometimes I get a sense that he wants to say we cannot because he's also an employer who would rather not pay. But
I'm being very honest.
Yeah, but that's all the time we have for now. You get a sense that there's a lot more that will happen in the next 48 hours in the next week to come.
But I'm sure at the end of the day they will arrive at a consensus.
Until then, we're gonna have to anchor the conversation here. As always, Ahmed Sajo, thank you so much for your expert analysis and for your insight on this issue. I appreciate you for stopping by tonight.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, okay. And as always, thank you for your time and company. We do appreciate you for joining us. Thank you for all the calls. Thank you for your contribution. Feel free to join us next week when we return live and exclusive on Trust TV. Until then, my name is Abdullahi Ahmed. For myself and the rest of the team, thank you for your time, and we'll see you soon.